Hey, what's up, everybody? Hope you all are doing great. Quick announcement before we get started. I wanted to make sure that you're all aware of my bi-monthly book recommendations email. For almost 10 years now, I've been sending out an email every other month with anywhere from 4 to 5 up to 8 books that I recently read and that I highly recommend. The books are all over the place as far as the subject goes and the genre and whether they're fiction or nonfiction. They're generally not really about the American West, although there are a few in there every now and then. But it's really just good books that I think are good and that I would like to recommend to people. And I started out by sending the thing out to maybe like 20 or 30 of my friends in 2015. And now the thing has grown and grown and grown. And by my standards, there are a lot of people on the list. And so people, for whatever reason, seem to enjoy the books that I recommend and my weird summaries of them. I think a lot of people think it's funny. But anyway, if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, there are no sales pitches. There's no funny business. There's no like trickery with internet stuff. It's just an email that I send out with a bunch of books in it. No pressure to sign up, but if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, you can go to the link in the episode notes or go to mountainprairie.com/reading. And there's a link in there, a little box. You put your email address in and you'll be good to go. Next one will come out towards the end of February. Thanks so much. This is the Mountain and Prairie Podcast. I'm Ed Robertson. My guest today is Nicole Qualtieri. Nicole is an outdoor writer and editor, a conservationist, and a committed outdoors woman. Over the past decade, she's worked with some of the most notable brands in the outdoor industry, including Meat Eater, Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, and Gear Junkie. And she has bylines with many well-known outdoor publications, such as Outside, Modern Huntsman, and Backcountry Journal. But despite being plugged in with many of the best names in the outdoor business, she and a few creative friends decided to go out on a limb and start their own outdoor publication, one that focuses on substance over clickbait, depth and vulnerability over the silly quest for virality and search engine optimization. The name of the project is the Westrn, and that's spelled W-E-S-T-R-N, and it combines the best parts of online writing and journalism with a printed, hold-it-in-your-hands newspaper that ships to subscribers 4 times per year. As you'll hear Nicole describe, the topics covered by the Westrn include hunting, conservation, and a wide range of outdoor adventure. But the deeper point of it all is to build a tight-knit community of engaged outdoor enthusiasts of all stripes who appreciate the value of nuanced writing, thinking, and publishing. As many legacy outdoor media brands have become controlled by private equity and now focus on scalability over creativity and quality, the roles of people like Nicole and her partners at the Westrn are all the more important. They really are putting themselves out there to make the Westrn a reality, and I greatly admire their vision and commitment to action. Nicole and I connected online. She was at her home in Anaconda, Montana, and I was here in Colorado Springs. And we had an enlightening conversation filled with lots of laughs about her fascinating life, career, and the creation of the Westrn. We discussed her upbringing and what she describes as a high-control religious cult, and how hunting and the outdoors were her way of working through some of that childhood trauma. We discussed her non-traditional career path, which included a stint as a stand-up comic, and how she worked her way into the outdoor industry. We talk about the importance of hard work, preparation, and grinding, and how self-confidence is generated from those activities. We talk about the current state of the outdoor media industry, the financial challenges of making it as a freelancer, her writing process, contentment versus happiness, her favorite books, and of course, her goals for the Westrn. Nicole was also kind enough to offer some discount codes for Mountain Prairie listeners, so follow the appropriate links in the episode notes or on the website to get 20% off annual memberships to the Westrn and or 20% off single issues of the print newspaper. A huge thanks to Nicole for the conversation, and thank you for listening. Hope you enjoy. Nicole, I was thinking about the last time we were on one of these silly internet calls together, and we were doing some planning for that Old Salt Festival thing. And I think that was the first time I'd actually spoken to you face to face over the internet. And within about 30 seconds, we completely took over the entire call talking about Roadhouse, the Gyllenhaal version versus Swayze, and derailed the call. for like 15 minutes while everybody else was just including the boss, Cole, was just sitting there kind of slack jawed. And so I don't know what's going to happen. We can do that. It's mine. This is mine. We can do whatever we want. But it was going to be
I mean, if you want me to make fun of Jake Gyllenhaal for a full hour, I'll do it. It's like, it's on, it's your podcast. So I welcome however you want this to go.
Well, that might be a Patreon exclusive episode. For this one, I wanted to start out when we were emailing, and I'm going to paraphrase a line from one of your emails. It's not an exact quote, but you said, I'm currently working on my first book, which is a memoir about growing up in a high control cult called The Way International, and how becoming a do-it-yourself hunter outdoorswoman gave me back my agency after a childhood marked by religious trauma. Like, that's quite an opening line there. And really, there's a lot there. And so I'm sure we got the listeners hooked now. Tell me, where did you grow up?
I grew up in northwestern Ohio until I was 8 years old. I lived on a commune that was the headquarters for an international non-denominational church. It's been interesting because I've had this big reckoning in the past couple of months with my childhood, because in many ways it was like really bucolic, and I lived on a giant farm, and I lived with people that knew me, and I had a lot of freedom. I was really, a very feral child. I actually listened to a podcast of another woman who she joined a cult. I was born into one. I was driving actually to the airport, and I almost had to pull over because I became like overcome with nausea and sort of this realization of like what that childhood was really like. And I think it's the good with the bad. My family was part of that church until I was 17, but I decided long before that I didn't want to be a part of it. So that ends up, I guess, that puts a lot of tension on someone as a young person, and tension is the core of every story. So it's a good story. It's hard to have lived it, but I think it also made me who I am today. So I wouldn't change it, I know that that's like probably not the answer that you would expect, but I really am in this moment of reckoning with it. And so I'm doing a lot of processing.
Why is it? Why now? Like, because you said if I read some of your pieces correctly, you're getting ready to turn 40, and so that was a while back. I'm curious why now? Like, is it because of some of this writing you've been doing? Because I know like your essay on killing animals, which is very awesome, by the way. I want to talk a lot about it. Like, you go deep into some of this. I mean, has writing been a part of you kind of reprocessing a lot of that?
I've been writing really since I was 5 years old. So it's always been the way that I process. I think after maybe, 35 years of writing, it's finally getting to they say it takes 10,000 hours to make an expert. I think I'm far beyond that. I'm a slow to get there. But I think, it's been the writing. I turned 40 last April. I think that like when you're constantly writing about like on a personal level, right? Like I write every day in a journal that I can. I'm not always writing every day. And there are certainly weeks that go by that I don't get personal things onto the page. I think there are just these moments that catch you and change you. On Killing Animals, initially it was called Killing Animals Helped Me Make Peace with Death. And that was a piece that I wrote initially for Outside Magazine, and they had accepted it. And then when I actually wrote it, they didn't want to publish it anymore. And I was pretty disappointed because I felt like it was one of the better pieces that I've written. And so I had bought this domain that I'd been sitting on called the Westrn, and that's TheWestrn. And I just decided to put it on Substack, and I wouldn't say that it went, hugely viral, but it went viral within my community and kind of gave me motivation that maybe it was the story that I thought it was. I think what happened, especially when I turned 40, is I really began to let go of the shame of not having a normal childhood. You and I were talking about that a Norman Rockwell painting before we got onto this into this conversation, and And you described, the pirate that wanted to be home with a family and the accountant that wanted to be a pirate on the sea. And
Yeah.
I think that's just a very human feeling. And as much as my childhood was really interesting, and I think there's also sort of this very cultural moment with cults right now. So I haven't been able to like get away from it in the past year or so. Like, it's books about cults. It's people that were in cults being on all my favorite podcasts, and I'm just sitting there listening, and I'm like, I don't want to hear about this. I lived this. So I think what happened is that maybe because it's in popular culture, like it sort of took away some of the shame factor for me. And then I think when you're able to kind of pull away from shame, you're faced with, the baldness of the truth. I think we try to cover that up with, toupees to look normal. But at the end of the day, like, you always know that there's a falsehood there protecting you. I think that one moment of listening to that particular podcast, which was Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach's podcast with Tia Levings, I believe is her name. I mean, that really spurred me to start writing about it in a different way. And that was really just a couple, like maybe 4 weeks ago. So it hasn't been very long.
Wow. There was I saw an interview or read about an interview, I think it was with the Dalai Lama, and it was with some sort of Buddhist monk, and he was talking about when he was a young man, there was some accident that happened that he was maybe not responsible for, but was in the area that ended up with a child getting killed. And the interviewer, who was an American or a Westerner, asked the question like, well, how did you ever get over that? How did you manage to get over that? And the Buddhist monk looked at him just kind of curious, like it didn't quite translate. He couldn't understand what he was asking. He said, I never got over it. Like it's part of me. That is part of me now. And I'll never be over it. It's me. And I think, that's always been pretty interesting for me to think about whenever I'm thinking about challenging things, or I've had a very lucky and a very privileged life, but like anything in my world that I consider a challenge, it's like, I don't want to get over it. I do, my gut instinct is to, but I think a more productive way is just to kind of embrace it more. At what point did you decide you wanted to move out west? Because if my research is correct, you went to Colorado State, but like, how did that come into your thinking, being from Ohio originally?
Yeah, so we lived in Ohio until I was 16. So coming out west was never my decision. I think that if you talked to 16-year-old me, she would have been happy in Ohio for the rest of her life, locked into her community. And I had a really wonderful community. So I'll give you a little bit of the timeline, because I think that it makes it just brings a lot of things into clarity. So when I was 8, we moved away from the commune, which is based near a place called New Knoxville, Ohio. And we moved to Columbus, Ohio. And so I had, I guess, a more normal childhood, for a few years. And then I was 12 in Ohio and Columbus. My dad was diagnosed with renal cell cancer, and he survived for 2.5 years. And then we lost him during my sophomore year of high school when I was 15, which really was not only a deep loss for me, because I was very close with my dad, but it was hugely marked by religious trauma, which a little bit about from reading on killing animals. And my mom is actually from Butte, Montana originally, and she did not like Ohio. She wanted to be back out west. And so 10 months after my dad passed away, she accepted a job with Quest or she was working for Quest, but they offered her a promotion in Denver. So we moved to Denver halfway through my junior year of high school, where I graduated from Wheat Ridge. I had always wanted to go to Ohio State. It was like my dad worked for and with people that were really supportive of the Ohio State football team. So I got to go to a lot of games as a kid. And my dad's best friend was John Hicks, who was the runner-up to the Heisman, I believe, in 1971 to Archie Griffin. And I was just really connected to like that whole Ohio State fervor, and I missed residency at Ohio State by 2 months. So I ended up going to Colorado State. But I mean, that's another one of those things that was a heartbreak. And Colorado State, I met my best friend in the dorms on day one, and she's coming here in 3 days, and we've been best friends for 23 years. So I can't I got so much from being in Colorado, but I moved to Boston after college and wanted to stay out there, but it was the recession. So I ended up back in Colorado. So what's funny, Ed, is I don't know that I ever chose the West. I think the West chose me.
I think it's interesting, though, that you kind of thinking about a bunch of different options. I mean, Boston, but you ended up back here. And then I think what's really cool is that you've really dug in and created this really cool life for yourself, based on telling these really interesting stories. I mean, what did you study in college?
Yeah, it seems a little off the wall, but I think it makes sense in the context of growing up in the cult. But I have a sociology and criminal justice degree, and I know it's so funny. So I started out equine science and pre-veterinary. I've been a horse gal for, my whole life, and that science track didn't really work out with my social goals in college. And I took a sociology 101 course, and I was like, oh, this is the macro level of everything that I experienced as a child, and understanding why people in groups behave the way they do. And so I fell in love with sociology. I really, really loved it. If you look at my GPA in college, when I was doing, all the courses I didn't want to do, my GPA wasn't great. And then it soared as I got into those higher level courses. So yeah, if you can tell, I am ADHD, to the core. So if something sparks my interest, I'm going to love it to death. And, that's how I am.
It seems like you're super curious, and if something captures your attention, you go all in. I mean, that's how I was. Even in grad school, I mean, I think in grad school, you're supposed to approach it like a job and real serious, but I was doing MBA. So half of it was stuff I was interested in, and the other half was how to operate a factory. And I was like, I don't care. I'm never going to do anything in a factory. And I refuse to do this course. I'm going to focus all my interest on the other stuff. And so my GPA was not good, because it was it was the average of really, really, really good grades and really, really bad grades.
Same.
I want to go back to your essay on killing animals, because I thought it was so powerful. I mean, the first time I read it, I was just amazed. And then I reread it before we had this conversation. Can you talk about the process of writing that? Because I would guess, from my perspective, it seems like that would be a very emotional thing. And I don't want to rehash the essay, because I want people to go and read it. But can you talk me through maybe why you decided to write about that, and then the process of writing it? Because I would guess, the way my brain works, it was probably pretty exhausting process, but I don't know. You tell me. That's why I'm asking the question.
I'll start with this. For anyone that's worked with me, I apologize. Writing is really the only thing that I'm good at. I'm really good at, I guess, I can find the muse. Do you know what I mean? I think that I've been I think I've had to be really as a protective measure for myself for a long time. And on killing animals, that piece came to me in a storm. It was, for me, sometimes writing can be this really out of body experience. And I really sat down and wrote that essay in an entire go in a couple hours. And it came out like a waterfall. And it was the culmination of trying to write about all of those things for a very long time, if that makes sense. It was just it was the moment for it to, hatch. And I've tried to write that story in a lot of different ways, and it never came out right. And in that moment it did. And it really didn't need a lot of rewriting. It was almost, I write poems, and and I wouldn't say that they're great, but I think if you listen to like a lot of the great poets, they don't really take responsibility for their poetry. It comes from somewhere else. It's like, like catching like the fluff of a dandelion on the wind, right? And you chase it and you harness it and it comes through you. And that's really how that piece felt. It felt like a big, long prose poem. And I guess I would think about it more like that than like your sort of classic essay. It's very scenic, probably isn't the right word, but I chopped it up in sort of these little small, really digestible scenes, and all of those scenes kind of build and play off of each other. And it was honestly, it felt like the work of a lifetime then. And I think like the next iteration of that is writing a longer piece that kind of writing a book, I guess is what I'm trying to say, which I'm about 20 pages into that, and it's harder to write than that essay. So,
well, just to be clear on that. So you sat down and you cranked it out in one, in some hours, one big push, but that was after struggling with it for a long time and trying to write about it unsuccessfully. Like, it's not like just one day you sat down and it went out. That it was the result of lots of grinding over a long period of time. And then it just all came together. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
That's really cool. And I think that's a good lesson. And I'd love to talk more about that right now, if you don't mind, about
Please.
You as a creative, just the importance of knowing how to grind, and not unnecessary, not torturing yourself or anything like that. But when you look at the work you put out, like on your website, there are all these different articles that you've written. And I mean, I think for Gear Junkie, maybe you've written over 400 different pieces. And so it's not like one day you just woke up and you could write. You crank on this, you put in the reps. Can you talk about that need of putting in the reps, both for the craft, but then also for attracting the muse?
For me, it really started as a kid. I started journaling in 7th grade. And I think from 7th grade to my senior year of high school, I have like almost every day documented in some form. And I was a good writer then, and I'm a good writer now. But I think that to be great, it's this process of continually getting it wrong and facing rejection over and over and over and over again, and being willing to get back up and keep going. I mean, really, it's an endless push up, right? If you put it into horse terms, I always say that the best thing that people can do for their kids is put them on a horse, and when they fall off, put them back on, and that was really like the ethos that I grew up with. And I think that has, I think it's a survival mechanism, but I also think it's like how you begin to thrive, as if you can face that rejection over and over again and still believe in yourself. I've never had imposter syndrome. You know what I mean? I think that like we've gotten into this like cultural space where it's like, it's cool to feel like an imposter. And it's sort of this sense of, I think it gives us like an excuse to say that we don't belong and we're different. But I think that like I've always had this deep-seated belief that I belong in any room that I'm in, and it's sort of unshakable. I'm indefatigable in that sense.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I will say that I grew up in a strange world, but my parents certainly always welcomed the opportunity for questions, and they believed in me, and they taught me that if I wanted something, it took a lot of hard work. And so, for the horses, for example, my parents bought me my first round of 8 lessons when I was 11 years old, and they never paid for anything after that. I would muck 16 stalls to ride for an hour. And so I'm a relentless personality, for better or for worse. And I think if you talk to a lot of people in my industry, they might say for worse. But, I would say most of them would think for better. It's written into my DNA. I can't help it. I've always thought that I deserved a seat at the table. But I will say this, I say that to my friends all the time, and I'm a fierce advocate for everyone belonging at the table and having a chance to bring their voice into it. I think that there's room for everyone.
What I like about that is I like a lot of stuff about that, but I think what's so cool about that is you do have this confidence, but it's based on your confidence, your self-confidence of knowing that you know how to work and that you can grind it out. Like, I mean, it's one thing if somebody comes along, like if somebody was saying what you said, but they had never done anything, or they had big plans, but had never followed through. But you can look, and I mean, starting from mucking stalls to working at Gear Junkie to the Westrn to, I mean, pretty much your hike. I saw that you did this cool solo backpacking trip that you raised money through Kickstarter. In my experience, at least, I gain confidence in things when I know that I've put in the work. I'm not a confident person at all, but I know I can generally grind pretty hard. And as long as I put in the work, the confidence is there. And so you're kind of reverse of me, because like the confidence there because you know you can grind versus I have to grind first and then the confidence comes. That's really cool.
It's funny to hear you say that. And maybe that is actually the case for me. Is that's a chicken or egg scenario. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know that there is one way or the other. It's kind of the same if you look at it. It is like a circle.
I don't think that I would belong at like a table of math professors. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess it depends on what table we're talking about. But if the table is, writing, storytelling, thinking about how do we impact an audience? How do we talk to groups at large? I love doing difficult things. I mean, I think we talked about this, but I did stand-up comedy for 3 years in Denver. And it was one of the most fun, but weird and wild times in my life. And, I guess this sounds, am I allowed to cuss on this? I won't.
Oh yeah, let it rip. Yes.
I really don't care if I eat shit. I will just eat shit over and over again until I figure it out. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
I love type 2 fun, but I would say that type 3 fun is where the story lives. And the type 3 fun is like that hike that I did for, 150 miles when I realized that my knees were actually way more arthritic. Pain has always been like wrapped into my life in a lot of different ways. And oh my gosh, was it like there was this old school, like, Nike slogan, and it had to do with pain being the precursor to success. I'm not going to get it right, but it was something along those lines, and I just loved it. I was a sports kid. I played soccer and lacrosse, and pain has never been, I guess, the thing that stopped me. It was sort of the thing that pushed me forward.
I think about it like that. That's the one thing, like, I don't think I'm naturally good at anything, but I've figured out over the years, the one thing I'm good at is not quitting, which for better or worse, sometimes that's not good. But like, I know that as people that are more talented than me might quit a little bit faster. And I just recently, I mean, I'm 47 and a year ago, I started doing jujitsu. And so like, I'm getting my ass kicked, like hard, amazing. Painful, like my shoulder, my neck's always hurting. I have to get marijuana lotion and rub it all over my neck because my neck's half broken because these like special forces dudes that are 22 are choking me. But I'm like, I can take it, man. Like I can take it.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what that's all about.
I probably would have been good at jujitsu, especially as a kid. I wouldn't.
Hell yeah.
I have a 3-year-old Mustang that I train on my own, and she's gotten me off once, but that was my fault. Yeah, that's what horse people say. We're in a constant abusive relationship. But yeah, I mean, horses are my jujitsu. The more you learn, the more you feel like a beginner. And I love I think that that's actually what's at the heart of all this. Like, I love being a beginner. I have zero shame. You could put me into any scenario. If I'm going to learn and do something, like, there's so much flow in me in the beginner state of mind.
Yeah, that's what's attracted me to jiu-jitsu is that it was the one thing I could find that I was a true beginner. When I learned how to surf when I was like 31, I moved to Costa Rica and went from zero to, I thought I was going from zero to being a competent surfer, but I was a really good swimmer when I moved there. And so like I had that base, like I used to do competitive
the fundamentals,
stuff.
right? I mean, I think, yeah.
But in jiu-jitsu, I didn't know, other than a few scraps, as a kid, I didn't know anything about fighting. And so that beginner, like embracing that and not being scared to get embarrassed, I think is key. Back to the essay on killing animals. What was Outside Magazine's problem with it?
I don't know. They didn't really give me any feedback. So I've written for them since. I don't have any problem with being rejected, by the way, by them or anyone. If the piece doesn't work, it doesn't work. I think that, I'm usually happy for people to say no because it means my work is going to find its home elsewhere. But that one was disappointing because that was before I was published in Outside, and Outside was like my dream publication. One of my favorite books is The Best of Outside, the first 20 years.
I have that.
Yeah. I bought it in 2011 when I was working in corporate America in my 20s, living in downtown Denver and doing stand-up comedy, and knew that like there was this huge void in my life. I was really going through, I was depressed. Living in the city was really hard on me. I read that book and it kind of opened up, the vault into what I wanted my life to be. And at that point, I didn't know where it would go. But, if you told me that I would have owned guns and been a hunting writer and, the next 10 years, I would have laughed at you and said, over my dead body. So, it's been a weird deal. But, the writing that Outside put out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, especially, to me, is some of the most important writing on the planet. And that is the place that I was always working toward. And as I kept working towards that place, there was less room for it in the industry. And today, I would say that sort of writing is so rare. It's like seeing like an albino bull elk that's like a 300 class bull. You know what I mean? It's really hard to find that kind of writing. So, thankfully, it exists. And I don't believe people when they say they don't want to read, or that they say, well, no one reads anymore. I think that that's complete BS. So yeah, it's a strange time for writing. But what I'm guessing is, Outside initially bought my headline, which was "Killing Animals Helps Me Make Peace with Death." And I think that they were expecting a piece that was going to be more bombastic than ethereal. And I would say that's kind of a more ethereal piece than bombastic. It's not a clickbait piece. It was a clickbait title. And honestly, it always rubbed me a little the wrong way. So I've recently changed it to "On Killing Animals" because that felt more appropriate.
Well, yeah, I had the exact same experience with Outside Magazine. I mean, I was 7 years ahead of you, I guess. But like I would read it, particularly when I was in my corporate job wearing a suit and a necktie and the whole deal. And I'd read Outside Magazine and just think about, all these cool people doing all this cool stuff. And I'm like, man, I want to be like them. How do you do that? And that's one of the reasons that's kind of the idea behind this podcast is you would have been one of those people I was reading about. And I'd be like, I want to understand how she did that. And so all this is an instruction manual to my 23-year-old self. But I feel like with all these, these kind of institutions of outdoor media that I used to be obsessed with. I remember when I started this podcast, it was like 3 or 4 years in, I was like, oh man, if only Outside Magazine would say something about me or write a thing about me, or if only I could somehow get have Mountain Prairie be a part of Outside Magazine. And then over the years, that never happened. I mean, I got mentions in certain things, but it didn't really matter one way or the other. And then over the years, it switched to, I'm so glad I don't work for one of these big institutions and I can do whatever the hell I want to do. And I think it ended up, and my trajectory has kind of followed the trajectory of the industry of things kind of breaking away from these institutional name brands and coming down to individuals doing their own thing. Speaking of that idea, can you talk about the Westrn and kind of when you decided to pull the trigger on that and do your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, the impetus was certainly, that I'm grateful for that rejection because it forced me to jump off of a cliff. I am a fierce proponent that the net will always appear. I have jumped off every cliff that I guess which is hilarious. In real life, I'm actually the one fear that I've never been able to conquer is my fear of heights. And so it's funny that if the cliff is metaphorical, I'm happy to jump off of it. I have such a love-hate relationship with the industry, and I think it's mutual. I still am so floored that Outside Magazine is in my bylines and that I've been able to write for them. I've worked with Kelly Klein, who is wonderful, and thank you, Kelly, for publishing my work. And Wes Seiler, who is actually a really good friend of mine. So it all came really, I think, through the network mostly, really through Wes. Where the Westrn came in is, it really, I think, I can't remember when I bought the domain, but it was, God, it must have been at least 2 years ago. So I'd been sitting on it for a while. Initially, my idea was kind of oh, I learned so much at Gear Junkie. I was there for over 4 years, and I can't say enough amazing things about their editorial team. Adam Ruggiero and Sean McCoy were mentors and friends to me, and they made me really the writer that I am today in a lot of ways. Sean really pushed me. When I got there, he's like, you're a good writer, but you're not a great writer yet. And he really pushed me to kind of, I don't have a journalism background. So he really took me under his wing and taught me how to write news and how to write for SEO. And it's a skill set that's really marketable, but it still wasn't the writing that I wanted to be doing. So I was able to pay the bills with my writing for the first time ever, really, when I went to Gear Junkie. I've worked in outdoor media for 10 years now. I started at Meat Eater. I was there 2.5 years. It was ZPZ Productions back then, which was the same production company that did all of Anthony Bourdain's shows. And then about a year after I left, Meat Eater became its own brand. So I worked on a couple different shows at ZPZ on the digital marketing and social media side. But all of these things, I guess, combined to really push me towards the Westrn. I feel like I have this really wide skill set, and I've always wanted to be entrepreneurial, but I did doubt myself on the entrepreneurial side until I felt like I had amassed the skill set to get going with it. I think it's, I feel like you don't really think that you're not going to be young. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, I definitely know. I've been thinking about that a lot recently as my hair just turns whiter by the day. I'm like, oh my God, there's no going back. This is
it.
I'm getting sucked down the river. I got to swim hard just to stay in the same spot. It's crazy.
It's funny because I will tell you that I would take entry-level jobs in all these different facets because I like learning how things work. And so I realized really in the past year, I'm like, you can do this, and honestly, really what happened after I wrote that piece, I also wrote a piece, and I don't think that it's still up, but it was about my relationship to SEO writing and how I felt like, I ground it out, right? You can see 400 articles on Gear Junkie, but I wrote actually many more than that under sponsored posts and staff posts. So yeah, I was prolific there, certainly. But I got burnt out. And I think that is, when you were interviewing the journalists at Old Salt, I don't know if you remember, I asked them the question what they actually did to make money. Do you remember that?
I do remember that. I was thinking about that this morning, I think, actually, because I thought it was a really good question.
Yeah. So I asked them that because I wanted to know whether they were making a full-time living off of their writing and their media work, and none of them were. And I think I think we have to understand the massive change that has happened in media in the past 20 years. it used to be really normal to know the journalists for your local newspaper and to have relationships with them in every single community in this country. It used to be, I wouldn't say easy to make a living as a journalist, but it used to be normal. And as everything becomes more monopolized, and that is the correct word, it is certainly being monopolized, the trickle-down theory of economics in the writing world is not, it's not trickling down. So I could talk to you for an entire podcast about what private equity is doing to not only outdoor media, but media, the whole
everything,
scale.
healthcare. I mean, across the board. I mean, they just, they gut things. And I mean, it's not like I have spent much time in private equity, but I got a lot of friends that work in it, and I don't know. It's
spreadsheets that end up, essentially breaking down our middle class. To me, the middle class is the working class now, whether you're educated or not. I've done a lot of research, and I've had these ideas of publishing an article about private equity and how it's affected outdoor media. So I've done a lot of research, and really we're kind of on this like 60-year cycle in media. And I went back and read Upton Sinclair's The Brass Check, which was published in the early 19th century. And, he was an incredible journalist. We all had to read The Jungle at some point in our educational careers. But he also wrote this really scathing book about how corporate entities were destroying independent media. And, that was the beginning of the 20th century. And then fast forward to the 1960s, and you have all of this independent media start to come up again because it's been corporatized. So honestly, we're actually right on track for the next cycle of independent media to begin to bubble up because people aren't able to make money in regular media. So I don't think that I'm a trailblazer in this. There are many people out there trying to figure it out. You're certainly ahead of the game. But I would say that in the next decade, I think we're going to see a lot of independent media resurface. And even if you look at outside, that came out of the 70s, and over the past 50 years has gotten increasingly corporate. So, I think it's actually patternable. I don't think that it's new. And I think history can inform us. And so for me, I looked to that history and I said, okay, well, what's the next leap? And the Westrn, came out of a rejection that I think was fueled not necessarily by malice, but, not fitting a clickable story.
What I really admire about what you're doing is, I think sometimes on the podcast, people think I'm like Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky and so nice, but a lot of times I'm just really frustrated with things. And I'll see, particularly online, on social media or whatever, is all these people endlessly complaining about whatever. I mean, in the case of outdoor media, just over and over how they can't make any money doing it, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, I'm sure there are a lot of, buggy makers when Henry Ford rolled into town that were complaining about not being able to sell carriages anymore. But what I admire about you is you're very aware of what's happening. You've studied it more deeply than I would guess most people. And then you take action. You're like, all right, this is the new market. This is what we're doing. This is a combination of where the market is versus what I'm good at versus what I want to do. And you go for it. And so and it's not like it's easy or anything. I mean, I definitely understand that, but I just think it's really admirable that you understand the reality of it and you're willing to talk about the reality of it, but then it's like, all right, now let's go. And so for somebody who's never been to the Westrn, how would you describe it?
Well, it started off as me running a Substack, right? Yep. And we could also get into the private equity of Substack. We're at the very beginning of our 5 to 7 year cycle, so have a second option, Ed. But yes. I do love Substack for a jumping off point. It really pulls away the need for a website build, all of these, building out a subscription model. It makes it actually really easy for independent media to get started. And so I had a Substack when I was at Gear Junkie, and I was told that I was going to get in trouble if I kept doing it. So I phased it out. But I decided to pick it up again. Obviously we've talked about that, but I did write a post about SEO writing and how it was had burned me out, in a way that I felt like I couldn't recover from. And I had so many writers reach out to me. It wasn't really a widely read piece, I think, beyond like the outdoor writing community. I had also been paying attention to, there's a woman named Lori Wolliver, and we were connected through ZPZ years ago, and she was Anthony Bourdain's like personal assistant, and she helped him write all of his books. And we've been online friends, and she had joined a cooperative of writers on the East Coast that had started this independent media deal. And I was like, why doesn't that exist for outdoor writers? And so I had, been paying attention to that. I had all these writers reaching out. Funny, a lot of them were women. Most of them were women. It's interesting to me that these would be the voices that find it most difficult to make money in outdoor media, but here we are.
Yep.
So it wasn't intentional that it was going to be all women, but that's who reached out. And I had invited 4 different journalists, all really accomplished, amazing women in the outdoor industry: Maggie Slepian, Gabriella Zaldumbide. Well, Kestrel Keller is non-binary, and I also identifies as trans, but I've known Kestrel for 10 years, and long before they decided to transition. And they're an incredible hunter and have been a hunting partner for a long time. So, I mean, that's a whole other conversation, but they're an incredible writer, written for Nat Geo, Wired, just one of the better science journalists, I think, in our industry. And then Katie Hill, who has been an up-and-coming conservation writer, staff writer at MeatEater, staff writer at Outdoor Life, and now freelancing. And it didn't work out for Maggie and Gabby. They just had other things going on. But beyond that, Kestrel, Katie, and I really kept our heads down and kept going. And what we ended up doing was creating the Substack, where we were promising 2 long reads a month. And that was really like the base promise. So we wanted to test ourselves to get back into that more narrative nonfiction voice. And I'm deeply proud of the work that we've done. It's been a mix of journalistic and personal narratives and, shorter writing, not exercises, but I guess like sort of these group writing efforts where we'll take one thing and each have a different take on it. And people were responding to it and loved it. So we sort of created a small community. And as we were always talking about print being a part of it, I think if you love words, you love print. And I don't think that's ever going to like leave the culture. I as much as people want to say print is dead, I would absolutely push back on that and say that print is evolving. And I think that if you can evolve in ways that serve community first rather than competition, then I think that people will come in droves, because I think that that's where, I think that that's really actually what drives us to be on social media, is a sense of community and a sense of talking to people and seeing what people are up to. I think that in the pandemic, it was really all we had to keep in touch with people. And so I think that gets left out of the narrative because people want to be so negative about it. And I understand why, because the community can feel shallow, but I will also tell you that social media has been able to bring together groups of people with the same interests. And that's certainly been the case for me. Almost all of my hunting partners are women. And I met, and even a lot of my male hunting partners I met through social media, especially in the early years. So there is a lot of real life interaction that comes from social media if you're curious enough to pursue it. But I want to see that community happening in different spaces. So we decided to start a quarterly newspaper. And it kind of, what it really came out of, Ed, was like, I miss the aspect of newspapers where like you would see like the local sports team winning the state championship, or you would see like the things that would connect you to your community that maybe you weren't a part of, but like you would see like firemen, letting kids use the fire hose, just like silly things like that. And so really like what we wanted to do was create a place where like people could send in a picture of their kid's first deer, or people could send in a picture of, summiting Mount Rainier with their 3 best friends, and have a place where they could celebrate themselves being outside. And stories and even advertisements are going to be a part of it, but it's going to be a 32-page newspaper. And the whole idea is just to create more opportunities for in-person connection. So we're going to have a full events calendar, and it doesn't necessarily have to be within the West. I know that the name is a little misleading, but it's really for anyone in the outdoors. Yeah.
And how do people subscribe? Like how do people get the physical copy?
Yeah, so we are offering it as a add-on to our Substack annual subscription. So that's $50 a year. You'll get all 4 issues as long as you send us your address. We're going to have a Google form set up for people to do that. We're also adding on a store element so people can buy individual copies if they want. And through our store, people are also going to be able to send in a classified ad. We're going to have a full page of personals that we're calling a meet and greet. And the personals are for, if you're looking for love, great. But like, we also want people to look for hunting partners and seek out people to go on adventures with, or just look for friends with similar, I live in Anaconda, Montana, and it's a very small town, and I'm pretty gregarious, but like even I've had trouble like meeting friends here. So, I'll probably put a friendship ad for people in my area. I'm thinking so deeply about like how we connect to people, how we do it through writing, and like what it would mean to me as a 12-year-old girl to like have a picture of, me on a horse, like in a local newspaper. And I want like people's families to have that experience. So yeah, I don't know. One of the things I'm also really excited about, which is a little off the wall, is getting silly putty and like using it to make like the mirror image of the ink with my nephews. Like nice. I loved that as a kid. It was like one of my favorite smells and like favorite things to do when the newspaper came. I've always loved silly putty.
I'd forgotten about it. I clearly remember the smell of silly putty.
Right?
Well, it's funny you're talking about print, because the episode I just put out, we're recording this. There'll probably be one episode between that. It was with a guy named Scott Hewlett, who's the creative director at the Surfers Journal. I listened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the Surfers Journal is alive and well and kicking ass, because it's a very specific, very niche product for a very, very, very small group of people who are all on the same page. And same for Adventure Journal, my friend Stephen Casimiro. And so I feel like, I think if when I think about the media landscape, I feel like everything is getting fragmented, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but everything is just getting more and more and more niche. And so what you're doing, I mean, the way I see it is you're creating community. You're creating a community, and you've mentioned several times like that the post was viral within your community. And I feel like that's the only thing that matters. I don't want the general public to hear or see any of my stuff, because odds are they'll hate it and they'll leave bad reviews, or they'll come after me for something dumb I said. I want my community to hear it. And that's it. And I feel like that's exactly what you're doing, which is so cool. It's one thing to come up with a good idea. It's another thing to actually do it, and you're doing it. And it's very inspiring for me to see. And I think people with creative aspirations who are listening, I think they really need to take note of your bias towards action and starting even when you don't have the full plan figured out,
No, and I that's part of jumping off that cliff, right? It's like it's figuring out how to open your chute without the instructions. I think that like there is, our culture is very like an independent, like it's very it leans towards competition over cooperation, and I don't think that that's like the natural human state, you know? I look at my horses every day, and they're never, I have 2 horses, a mule, and then Kestrel has a donkey that lives with me year round. And they are never in 4 different parts of the pasture. They're always together. Like they are a unit. And I think that that is the natural human place to be, is within a unit. And I don't necessarily think that that unit has to be proximal. I think that that unit can be spread apart over miles and states and still thrive. And I would look at my friendships as being an example of that. My closest friends don't live anywhere near me, and yet they still know where I'm at in my life. And so I will say that's like the blessing and the curse of technology, right? It's harder to meet people proximally, but it's way easier to keep in touch with the people we know at distance. I mean, even when I was a kid, like making a long distance call was a big deal in our house. So,
oh, sure.
And that doesn't exist anymore. So it's easy to get to see where like communities have been fragmented, or where people are lonelier, or where, I've lived alone for 15 years, and loneliness is certainly, it comes up at times, but like I always feel held by community and my family. And I think that it takes work to maintain those relationships, but it's like the best kind of work that we can do. If I can do that at scale, right? Like through the newspaper, through the Westrn, through connecting deeply with people, even if it's through something like an essay, or through the opportunity to share photos of our friends, or a personal ad where someone legitimately is seeking connection, and it's not so flippant that you can just swipe right on it. Like there's a person on the other end of the line. I just like, I deeply believe that that's what we are wired to want as human beings. And I'm not saying that because listen, I'd love to make a living off of the Westrn. The reason that I've been able to lean into my creativity is that I've actually really been struggling with employment for months, and really doing my best to find a position or contracts that could help. But I have also realized that maybe at 40, I'm ready to do this on my own. So it's been a big gamble financially, and it's been not without support of friends and family, but I don't have a huge financial support to fall back on. So this is all by the skin of my teeth, and it's a huge risk, and it could blow back in my face. And at the end of the day, like, I think sometimes you have to hit that, I guess, negative space to force yourself into creativity. And thankfully, like, I was given like that skill set through the jobs that I've done, and through, the work that I've done on the side of my jobs. So yeah, I'm not in a soft place right now. I mean, you know what I mean?
Well, I don't think anything good happens in soft places. I mean, it's not pleasant being where you are, but like, it wasn't pleasant for me this morning when that special forces guy was cutting off the blood supply to my brain.
Exactly.
But I was paying
like
money.
I said, I like pain.
Weirdly. Yeah. We're good at it. We can handle it.
I don't know if I trust the soft place Ed. In the times where I've like landed in like really good places, like I wait for the other shoe to drop. You know what I mean?
I do too.
I don't trust it. I'm like, what?
I don't trust it. I don't like whenever things get too good, I start getting real nervous that something's going to happen.
Maybe that's my imposter syndrome.
Maybe it might be, but I think that discomfort is powerful stuff comes out of it. And I find that I'd much rather be content than happy, because I can be content even in the worst, like mile 85 of a ultra marathon in the middle of the night. I can be content. I'm not happy, but I'm content. Whereas like if I'm happy, happy is only happy because it's relative to sad. Whereas I don't want to, it makes me nervous.
Can we talk about the etymology of happy for a second? It's
Please.
like one of my favorite things. Okay, so happy, if you look back at the word happy and the etymology of it, it stems from the word hap, which I believe is Old English for luck. So hap, if we think about it, figures into a lot of different words, right? Happenstance, happening. And if we look at happy with its root being luck, then we can see it as not a thing to pursue, but a moment that we need to grasp when we have it and wait for the next time that luck finds us. And that has been really freeing for me to understand the etymology of that word, because I think that I don't want to say that our founding fathers got it wrong, like the pursuit of happiness, but I don't think pursuing luck is a great idea for anyone. Mm-hmm. I think that pursuing contentment is a beautiful thing, but even that is fleeting, right? So honestly, I think it's actually about the pursuit itself. And I think it's about where that pursuit, where we say yes within that pursuit, that leads us to those moments of flow and happiness and contentment. But those are all fleeting, and they just come back to the pursuit again, you know? So I as a hunter, the pursuit is the best part of the whole deal, you know? So there's a lot to be said there. But I will say that, like, I would, if you're chasing happiness, it can be a fickle place to be. I think that you'll find happiness in the pursuit of things that are deeper and require struggle and require, you know, climbing mountains and require all of those things. So yeah, I mean, I think for me, finding flow is probably more important than happiness.
That's really, I've been thinking about that a lot, and that helps me think about it more clearly. So thank you. So speaking of that, You're talking about that the background of words and Latin and all this very smart person stuff. You obviously read a lot of books. No, I'm a nerd. You're not. You're cool. I'm the nerd. Tell me, what are your favorite book? Give me some book recommendations.
Okay, I was thinking about this, and it's sort of like asking me like what my favorite pet is out of all of my animals, and I have 7, so that's a lot. But so I wrote down a little list. So we already talked about The Best of Outside, the first 20 years. If you love the outdoors and you don't own that book, shame on you. Go buy it right now. That's all I need to say. Actually, here, I'll give you a list of people that are in it, and then maybe you'll feel compelled. Tom McGuane, Ed Abbey, Annie Proulx, David Quammen, John Krakauer, Jane Smiley, Jim Harrison, among many others. Wow. Published 1998. Yeah. It is absolutely, like, my copy is yellow. It doesn't have a cover. I've dropped it into the bathtub. It looks terrible, and I'm never replacing it. Moving on. Pam Houston has been... she probably thinks I'm a stalker, actually, Ed. Sorry, Pam. I have not meant to stalk you. She has been, like, really transformative for me in my life. The book that really transformed me was, it's out of print now. It's called A Rough Guide to the Heart, but she has another book that has a lot of the same essays called A Little More About Me. And those are her memoirs about being a travel journalist, a whitewater rafting guide. She really, like, set the pace for what I thought an outdoor writer could be as a woman. And she's a dream. Everyone should read Pam. Helen MacDonald, H is for Hawk, is one of the best books I think ever written. She's a British writer. She's just... yeah, that book, you know, she talks about losing her dad too. So yeah, that book was really transformative for me. Those are my outdoor, if you want to be an outdoor writer, like, read those books. Those are nice. Like, to me, those are like the pinnacle. I won't mention Jim Harrison because everybody does. So we've already sort of mentioned him. I could go on, but I have Andy Anderson's photo of him in my kitchen. And yeah, so obviously I love Jim. So books on conservation in the West, which I knew that you would love. So the best book I've ever read on conservation history in the West is by a man named Louis Warren, and it's called The Hunter's Game. And it's about poachers and conservationists in 20th century America. And it is a very small print run, but I believe it was his doctoral thesis. And it is absolutely incredible. He goes into how hunting tags and licenses came out of racism against Italian Americans in Pennsylvania, and Aldo Leopold's effect on New Mexico in both good and bad ways, and the forming of Glacier National Park and the effect that it had on the Blackfeet tribes. I think that it's one of the best books on conservation history that no one's ever read. Find it, read it. It's incredible.
Cool.
And then I have my poetry names, and I will just list them.
Yeah, please.
Jim Harrison, Returning to Earth is my favorite poem of his. Mary Oliver's Devotions. Nikki Giovanni recently passed away. She wrote a great poetry collection that's always been one of my favorites called Bicycles. And then I have one tattoo, and it's from one of the odes that Pablo Neruda wrote, and it's called Ode to the Black Panther. And his odes are just like next level writing, and his poetry is also really funny. And I would highly recommend reading Neruda. So that's what you get when you ask a writer for a favorite writer.
No, that's the whole point. That's the whole point of this thing. And all that stuff's going to be in the notes. People can click through. And I was actually just thinking about poetry the other day. Oh, I've been reading a bunch of Wendell Berry stuff, and he's obviously his fiction reads like poetry, and I need to read more. So you read my mind on that. I'm going to check it out. All right. Last question is kind of a catch-all. What did I miss? Any parting words of wisdom? You're just doing such cool stuff. And I think,
thank you.
I think I said this before we started recording, like the end product is awesome, obviously. But what really impresses me and what I can connect with, because I can never produce anything like you do, but what inspires me is the work ethic and the focus and the philosophy behind everything you're doing, and the ability to be vulnerable about this stuff, to be open about it, but to also, look at things clearly, but take action versus, the standard complaining that most people like to do these days. It's just all your operating system is so cool. And so you got any kind of parting words for us?
I kept writing things down and then crossing them out. It's like, I don't know what to leave everyone with. Okay. So I'll say the first one that I came up with, and that is to meet your heroes. And people say not to meet them. I think being disappointed by your heroes is like one of the biggest gifts you can possibly get, because it is proof that they're human, and it is proof that they are fallible, and it is proof that you can stand in their shoes. And I have met a lot of my heroes, and they have disappointed me greatly. And some have, some haven't. I will say that I think Tom Green, I was always a huge fan of his comedy, one of the greatest people on the planet. I will stand by that till the day I die. He was so sweet when I met him when I was in the comedy scene. Thank you, Tom Green. You gave me faith in one of my heroes. He's wonderful. So I just know that your heroes are human. Yeah. I think it's so easy to like get caught up in this idea that like there are certain people that have a glow about them, and like to deify your heroes. But I think being disappointed by your heroes is one of the biggest gifts that you can get, because it just shows that they're fallible, just like you.
Yeah, it's empowering because they're just normal people. That's what I've learned on this podcast. Everybody I talk to, and many of them were and still are my heroes. And it's just like, they're just normal people figuring this thing out. There's no secret formula. So anyway, I am so glad that we finally made this happen. Ever since our disruptive Zoom call about a year ago, I've wanted to get you on here.
Okay, I know you don't want me to sing your praises, but shortly after that call, you and I jumped on a phone call, and I was in this space where I was about to jump on all of these things, Ed, and I had started the Westrn, and I was thinking about maybe doing a podcast. I didn't know like what, and I've worked on a lot of podcasts. Meat Eater, Hal Herring and I built the BHA podcast together. So I've been in and out of that space for a long time, and I've really respected what you've been able to do. And I'm pretty sure we talked for like just 2 hours about your process and what you do. And I've gone back and listened to your podcast on podcasting, and the theme that kept coming up for me that I thought was really important was generosity. And I have held that so closely to my heart and just everything that I've been doing in the past year since we had that conversation. So even my fellow co-founders would say that I kept bringing up generosity to the point where they're like, okay, we've had enough, so thank you for that. I'm going to be annoying with my generosity, if not anything else. But you took the time to be a mentor in a moment that I needed it. And I will tell you that as a woman in the outdoor industry, it's been really difficult to find. There have been a few people that have taken that sort of time to truly mentor me. And it's in those moments, so yeah, thank you for that. It meant a lot. And it really helped me to reform how I wanted to look at the work that I've been doing over the past year.
Oh man, thank you so much. I used to argue with people when they say nice things, and I tell them, argue with them and say, I don't know what I'm doing. And I just took that idea from somebody else. But instead of doing all that, I'm just going to say thank you very much. And I wouldn't have been talking on the phone with you for that long if I didn't enjoy every minute of it. And so I'm just really glad to know you. And I'm excited to see where all this stuff continues to go and evolve and grow. And it's super inspiring. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. It's been a total pleasure.
Hey, it's Ed again. Thanks so much for listening to the podcast. I know your time is valuable, so it means the world that you spend it listening. If you want to support the podcast and help it to continue to spread and grow, there are a few ways you can help. Number one, pass it along to a friend or share it on social media. Word of mouth recommendations are the most powerful way for ideas to spread, so I'd love it if you could share the podcast with a few pals who might enjoy it. Number two, you can go to Apple Podcasts and give it a 5-star review. Good reviews encourage the Apple overlords to suggest the podcast to others. So there's a link in the notes if you'd be so kind as to give it 5 stars. Number 3, you can support the podcast financially via Patreon, and there are exclusive benefits for those who do, including a monthly behind-the-scenes newsletter, Mountain and Prairie stickers, live and recorded video chats with podcast guests, and much more. Number 4, I've also got 2 emails that I send out. The first is my weekly email called Good News from the American West, which I send out every Wednesday. It's only positive news, something we can all use a little more of these days. And my other email is my bi-monthly book recommendations email. One email every other month with 5, 6, 7, or 8 books that I've recently read and highly recommend. The thousands of people on both of these lists will vouch for me. No spam or other funny business. And number 5, finally, check out my online store for Mountain and Prairie stickers, shirts, and coffee mugs. I've got some really cool designs from Westrn artists with more on the way, so head to mountainandprairie.com/shop to check it all out. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn, so look me up on either of those platforms by my name or through the links on my website. All right, that's it. Thanks so much for your support.